Ever wonder what it really took to survive as a Roman gladiator? Forget the Hollywood blockbusters and romanticized tales. Today, I'm stepping into the arena to unveil the grueling daily routine, the brutal training, and the constant threat of death that was the true reality for these ancient fighters. Prepare to see the harsh truth behind the legend. Settle back and let your breathing slow as we journey together into the dusty, blood-soaked world of ancient Rome. Tonight, you'll experience life through the eyes of a gladiator, not the romanticized hero of Hollywood films, but a real man whose existence balanced on the razor's edge between glory and death. Imagine yourself stepping into the worn leather sandals of Marcus Flavius, a Thracian warrior captured in battle and sold into the brutal world of the arena. The year is 73 CE, during the reign of Emperor Vespasian, when gladiatorial games reached their peak of popularity and spectacle. You are housed in the Ludus Magnus, the great gladiatorial school connected by underground tunnel to the Colosseum itself. As you close your eyes and let your mind drift backward through the centuries, feel the Mediterranean sun warming your skin. Smell the mixture of olive oil, sweat and sand that permeated every corner of a gladiator's world. This is not a tale of heroism or romance, but of survival, routine, and the strange dignity that could be found even in the most degrading circumstances. The wooden clapper echoes through the stone corridors of the Ludus before dawn, its harsh rhythm cutting through whatever restless sleep you've managed to find on your straw pallet. The cell you share with 3 other gladiators measures barely 8 feet by 10, its walls black with soot from countless oil lamps and carved with the desperate scratches of men marking days' victories or simply asserting their continued existence. You stretch muscles that ache perpetually, some from yesterday's training, others from injuries that never quite heal properly in this damp, crowded place. The morning air carries the familiar mixture of scents that define your world. The sharp tang of vinegar used to clean wounds, the earthy smell of the training sand, and underneath it all the metallic scent that seems to cling to everything in a place where men regularly bleed. Water comes first, tepid, slightly brackish liquid, dispensed from clay amphorae by silent slaves who avoid eye contact. You cup it in your hands, drinking deeply despite its unpleasant taste, knowing that hydration could mean the difference between clear thinking and a fatal mistake in today's practice. The quantity is measured precisely, enough to maintain health, never enough for comfort. Your cellmates begin to stir. Gaius, a former legionnaire whose gambling debts delivered him to this fate. Cassius, a German tribesman whose entire village was destroyed in the northern campaigns, and young Lucius, barely 16, sold by his own family to pay their crets. Each man has learned to wake quietly, understanding that unnecessary noise in the early hours brings the guards' attention, and guards' attention rarely brings anything pleasant. The morning meal arrives as pale light begins to filter through the high, barred windows. Thick barley porridge, occasionally supplemented with small pieces of meat or vegetables past their prime, served in wooden bowls that have absorbed years of previous meals. The gladiators call this mixture gladiator stew, and while it lacks any pretense of flavor, it provides the dense nutrition needed to build and maintain the muscle mass that keeps you alive. You eat methodically, as you've learned to do everything in this place, with attention to efficiency rather than pleasure. Around you, conversations are conducted in the multiple languages of the empire, Latin mixed with Germanic dialects, Gallic phrases, and the occasional Greek curse. Despite coming from different corners of the known world, all of you have learned the essential vocabulary of survival. The names of weapons, body parts, and the various commands shouted during training. As breakfast concludes, you hear the familiar sound of the guards' hobnailed boots on stone, accompanied by the rattling of keys and the scrape of iron door bars. The day's training roster is announced, and you learn whether today brings weapons practice, conditioning, or, worst of all, a summons to actual combat in the arena. Today, mercifully, is devoted to training. You file out with the others into the central courtyard of the Ludus, a rectangular space surrounded by the multi-story building that houses hundreds of gladiators, trainers, guards, and the various support staff that keeps this machine of entertainment functioning. The morning sun reveals the training ground in all its utilitarian brutality. Thick sand covers the packed earth, sand that will absorb sweat, blood, and occasionally other bodily fluids during the day's exercises. Wooden posts, scarred from countless sword strikes, stand at regular intervals. Racks of practice weapons line the walls. Wooden swords weighted with lead, blunted spears, nets with carefully dulled hooks, and the various specialized armaments that correspond to different gladiatorial types. Your trainer, Quintus Maximus, is a former gladiator himself, his body a map of scars that tell stories of 23 victorious contests before earning his freedom. His voice, permanently hoarse from years of shouting instructions, carries absolute authority. Under his watchful eye, you begin the daily routine that has shaped your body into its current form, muscles built not for aesthetic appeal, but for the specific demands of armed combat. The morning begins with conditioning exercises that would challenge even the fittest legionnaire. Running in formation around the courtyard's perimeter, the sand shifting beneath your feet with each step, your breathing becoming labored as the sun climbs higher. Push-ups performed with perfect form, while Quintus walks among the trainees, his wooden staff ready to correct technique or motivate flagging effort. Rope climbing comes next, your hands already rough with calluses gripping the coarse hemp as you haul yourself upward repeatedly. The rope burns against your palms despite the thick skin you've developed, but showing weakness invites correction. And correction in the Ludus often involves pain that makes the rope burn seem trivial. Weapons training begins as the sun reaches its quarter height. You are a retiarius, a net fighter, one of the most technically demanding gladiatorial specializations. Your equipment consists of a weighted net, a long trident, and a dagger, supplemented by minimal armor. A shoulder guard on your left arm, and a metal sleeve protecting your sword arm. This light protection means survival depends entirely on mobility, timing, and the ability to control distance between yourself and more heavily armored opponents. The net requires constant practice to master. Folded properly, it must unfurl in a perfect circle when cast, its weighted edges designed to entangle an opponent's weapons or limbs. Hour after hour, you practice the casting motion against wooden targets, gradually developing the muscle memory that allows accurate throws while moving, dodging, or under the stress of mortal combat. Quintus demonstrates the proper technique repeatedly, his movements still fluid despite the grey in his hair and the slight stiffness in his left knee, a reminder of his final victory in the arena. The net is not a weapon, he tells you, as he has told countless students before. The net is time. It buys you the heartbeats needed to position your trident for the killing thrust. Between casting practice, you work on the intricate footwork that keeps a retiarius alive. Light, quick steps that maintain balance while allowing rapid changes in direction. The sand shifts unpredictably underfoot, mimicking the conditions you'll face in actual combat, where proper footing often determines the difference between victory and death. The trident demands its own specialized training. Unlike a sword, which can be effective with simple thrusting or slashing motions, the trident requires precise technique to be deadly. Its three-pronged head can trap an opponent's weapon, but only if wielded with perfect timing and angle. Too early, and your opponent escapes the trap. Too late, and their weapon finds your unprotected flesh. Mock combat against other gladiator types forms the core of afternoon training. Today you're matched against Brutus, a murmillo whose heavy rectangular shield and sword represent the traditional Roman legionnaire style. His bronze helmet, with its distinctive fish crest, limits his vision, but provides substantial protection. Your task is to use superior mobility and reach to overcome his defensive advantages. The practice bout begins with the ritual words, Ave Caesar morituri te salutamus. Hail, Caesar, those who are about to die salute you. Even in training, the phrase reminds all present of the ultimate purpose of these exercises. Brutus advances steadily, his shield presented at the proper angle to deflect your trident thrusts, while his sword remains ready for any opening you might provide. You circle left, away from his weapon hand, casting your net in a wide arc that forces him to raise his shield higher than optimal. The net falls short, but creates the opening you need to dart forward with a trident thrust aimed at his unprotected right leg. He pivots, catching your weapon's shaft against his shield's edge, using his superior weight to force you backward. You give ground willingly, understanding that a retiarius wins through patience and opportunism rather than direct confrontation. The dance continues for several minutes, each exchange teaching lessons that could preserve life in actual combat. Quintus calls a halt as the sun reaches its midday peak. The brief respite allows for water and a small portion of bread, but rest periods in the ludus serve primarily functional rather than humane purposes. Bodies pushed to exhaustion cannot learn effectively, and ineffective gladiators provide poor entertainment before dying unprofitably. Afternoon training focuses on endurance and pain tolerance. Gladiators must learn to function effectively while injured, since minor wounds are inevitable in combat, and showing weakness invites a finishing blow from either opponent or crowd. You practice combat techniques while carrying weights, simulating the fatigue that accompanies blood loss. Wooden swords strike against your unprotected skin, teaching your body to absorb impacts without flinching in ways that create openings for more serious attacks. The psychological conditioning proves as important as physical preparation. Quintus regularly shouts insults, threats, and distractions during training, accustoming you to maintaining focus despite the chaos and noise that characterize arena combat. The crowds roar, the cries of wounded fighters, the metallic clash of weapons. All must become background elements that your mind learns to filter while maintaining deadly concentration on your immediate opponent. As afternoon shadows begin to lengthen, training concludes with maintenance activities that reinforce the ludus hierarchy. Equipment must be cleaned and stored properly, the training ground raked smooth for tomorrow's exercises, and any injuries attended to by the school's medical staff, former military surgeons whose services represent a valuable investment in gladiatorial property. The evening meal provides slightly more variety than breakfast, sometimes including vegetables, cheese, or even small portions of meat. Wine, heavily watered, accompanies the food, enough to ease the day's accumulated pains, never enough to impair tomorrow's performance. Conversations during meals range across the topics that occupy men living constantly in death's shadow: memories of life before the ludus, speculation about upcoming games, analysis of fighting techniques, and the careful sharing of information about which trainers, guards, or officials might be bribed, avoided, or trusted. Evening brings the only hours approaching personal time in a gladiator's existence. Oil lamps cast flickering light through the corridors as men attend to private tasks, repairing equipment, writing letters for those few who are literate, sharing stories, or engaging in games of chance with small stakes, bits of food, minor possessions, or promises of future favors. Some gladiators spend these hours in quiet contemplation or prayer to whatever gods they hope might preserve them through their next combat. Others engage in the physical relationships that develop naturally among men living in close quarters under extreme stress, finding temporary comfort in human connection despite the knowledge that any of these relationships could end suddenly with a poorly timed thrust or an unlucky fall. The reality of your existence settles over you as darkness deepens and the sounds of the ludus gradually quiet. Tomorrow will bring another day of training, another step closer to your next appearance in the arena, another roll of fortune's dice that will determine whether you live to see another sunset. You close your eyes on your straw pallet, muscles aching from the day's exertions, mind cycling through the techniques and scenarios that Quintus drilled into your memory. Around you, your cellmates settle into their own restless sleep, each man alone with his thoughts despite the close quarters. This is the rhythm of gladiatorial life, endless preparation, punctuated by moments of absolute terror and violence, mundane routine shadowed by the constant possibility of sudden, brutal death. It is existence stripped to its most essential elements: survival, skill, and the thin hope that tomorrow's dawn will find you still breathing in this strange world where entertainment and slaughter dance together in the sand. The path that led you to this life began not in Rome, but in the rolling hills of Germania, where your story started 28 years ago. Your name then was Wolfram, son of a tribal chieftain who commanded respect among the scattered settlements along the Rhine. The memories of that earlier life now seem like fragments of someone else's dream. The scent of pine forests after rain, the taste of honeyed mead during harvest festivals, and the sound of your father's deep voice recounting tales of ancient heroes around the evening fire. Your transformation from free Germanic warrior to Roman gladiator began on a grey autumn morning when Roman legions crossed the river in force. The campaign was methodical, as Roman campaigns always were, a systematic conquest designed not merely to defeat enemy forces, but to reshape the very landscape of resistance. Your tribe had allied with others, forming a confederation that might have succeeded against a less disciplined enemy. Against Roman military precision, however, courage and individual prowess proved insufficient. The battle lasted 3 days. You fought with the fury of a man defending everything he held dear: your homeland, your family, your very identity. The Roman soldiers were professionals, trained to work as a cohesive unit, their shields locked together like scales on some great serpent. Your people fought as individuals, each warrior seeking personal glory even in defeat. It was magnificent and utterly doomed. On the 3rd day, with your forces scattered and your father's body cooling among the fallen, you found yourself surrounded by Roman soldiers. A centurion with scarred hands and intelligent eyes looked you over with the calculating gaze of a man assessing valuable property. Your size, your obvious skill with weapons, and perhaps most importantly, your survival of 3 days of brutal combat marked you as potentially valuable, not for execution, but for a different kind of death. The march south took 6 weeks. Chained to other prisoners, you walked roads built by Roman engineering, passed through cities that demonstrated Roman wealth and power, and slowly began to understand the true scope of the empire that had swallowed your world. The other captives included warriors from various Germanic tribes, a few Dacians from campaigns along the Danube, and even some Romans who had fallen afoul of the law or their creditors. Rome itself struck you like a physical blow. The sheer size of the city, the multitudes of people speaking dozens of languages, the monuments and temples that dwarfed anything you had imagined possible. All of it combined to make you feel insignificant. Just another barbarian absorbed into an empire that seemed as eternal and unstoppable as the seasons themselves. The slave market was an education in human degradation. You stood naked on a wooden platform while potential buyers examined your teeth, felt your muscles, and discussed your probable value in terms that reduced you to livestock. Your Germanic heritage actually increased your worth. Northern barbarians were considered naturally suited for gladiatorial combat, their supposed love of fighting making them ideal arena entertainment. Your purchase by Gaius Aurelius Maximus, owner of one of Rome's most prestigious gladiator schools, marked the beginning of your second life. Maximus was a former gladiator himself, a Thracian who had won his freedom through exceptional skill and showmanship. He looked at new acquisitions with the eye of someone who understood both the technical requirements of arena combat and the entertainment demands of Roman audiences. "You have the build of a murmillo," he announced after a brief examination, "but the eyes of a man who thinks before he acts. That combination can be profitable if you survive the training. The initial weeks in the Ludus nearly broke you. The physical demands were manageable. Germanic warriors were accustomed to hard training and harsh conditions. The psychological adjustment proved far more difficult. You had been raised to believe that death in battle was the pathway to honor, that a warrior's worth was measured by his courage and his loyalty to his tribe. Now you were expected to fight for the amusement of people who viewed you as an exotic curiosity, to kill or die for no higher purpose than entertainment. Other gladiators helped you navigate this transformation. Marcus, the veteran Thracian, became something of a mentor, teaching you not just fighting techniques, but the complex social dynamics of gladiatorial life. "We are slaves," he explained during one of your evening conversations, "but we are also celebrities. Rome loves us and despises us simultaneously. That contradiction is the key to survival." The training regimen was more sophisticated than anything you had experienced, even among your warrior people. Every aspect of combat was analyzed, practiced, and perfected. You learned to fight not just with sword and shield, but with the awareness that every movement was being evaluated for its entertainment value. A clumsy thrust that missed its target might still draw cheers if it appeared dramatic enough. A defensive maneuver that looked desperate could build crowd sympathy, making them more likely to grant mercy if you were defeated. Your first fight came after 8 months of training. The editor had arranged a program of 20 combat pairs, starting with less experienced gladiators and building toward the featured matches involving established favorites. You were paired against a fellow Germanic captive named Siegfried, a mountain of a man whose preferred strategy involved overwhelming opponents through sheer aggression. The morning of the games, you woke before dawn, your stomach tight with anticipation and fear. The pre-fight ritual was elaborate and nerve-wracking. First came the ceremonial breakfast, honey cakes and wine, foods rich enough to provide energy, but light enough to avoid nausea during combat. Then the formal inspection of weapons and armor, conducted by arena officials who ensured that all equipment met safety standards designed to produce good fights rather than quick executions. The procession into the arena was theater of the highest order. Gladiators marched in formation, their polished armor gleaming in the afternoon sun, while musicians played triumphant melodies and crowds cheered their favorites. You had never seen so many people in one place. The Colosseum held 50,000 spectators, a number that exceeded the entire population of most Germanic settlements. Standing in the arena sand, looking up at tier upon tier of faces, you experienced a moment of profound disorientation. These people had come to watch you fight and possibly die for their amusement. Some would cheer for you, others would favor your opponent, but all of them viewed the upcoming combat as entertainment comparable to theatrical performances or chariot races. The disconnect between their casual enjoyment and your mortal peril was almost overwhelming. The fight itself lasted nearly 20 minutes, an eternity in arena terms. Siegfried attacked with the fury you had expected, his massive sword carving through the air with enough force to shatter shields. You responded with the tactical awareness that Maximus had identified, using superior mobility and technique to avoid his attacks while looking for openings to counterattack. The turning point came when Siegfried overextended during a particularly aggressive assault. His sword buried itself in your shield, and for a moment he was vulnerable. Your thrust took him in the shoulder, drawing first blood and earning a roar from the crowd. The wound was serious, but not immediately fatal. Exactly the kind of dramatic injury that prolonged fights and built audience excitement. What followed was a careful dance between exhaustion and determination. Siegfried fought bravely despite his injury, occasionally landing blows that dented your armor and left you gasping. You pressed your advantage systematically, inflicting additional wounds that gradually wore down your opponent's strength and mobility. The crowd's excitement grew with each exchange, their cheers and shouts creating a wall of sound that seemed to physically press against your tired body. The end came suddenly. Siegfried stumbled, his weakened left arm unable to properly control his shield, and your sword found the gap in his armor at the throat. He fell to the sand, blood mixing with the carefully prepared surface, his eyes already glazing over with approaching death. The crowd fell momentarily silent, then erupted in appreciation for the entertainment they had witnessed. Standing over your fallen opponent, sword raised in acknowledgement of the crowd's approval, you experienced a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in your victory, grief for a fellow warrior's death, satisfaction at surviving your first arena test, and a growing understanding of your new identity. You were no longer Wolfram, Germanic tribesman. You were now a gladiator of Rome, a killer who performed for applause. The years that followed brought additional victories, each one adding to your reputation and your monetary value. You learned to read crowds, understanding when they wanted quick, efficient combat and when they preferred prolonged, dramatic battles. You developed a fighting style that combined Germanic ferocity with Roman tactical sophistication, earning the nickname Lupus, the Wolf, from appreciative spectators. With success came privileges, better quarters, superior food, access to the best medical care available in the ancient world, and eventually the right to train newer gladiators. You began to understand that the Ludus was not merely a prison, but a complex institution that served multiple purposes: entertainment venue, military training ground, and social safety valve that allowed Rome's masses to witness spectacular violence without threatening civil order. Your reputation grew beyond Rome itself. Provincial governors requested your services for games in their cities, and your appearances commanded premium prices. Wealthy Romans began to recognize you on the streets, and some even sought your favor, understanding that gladiatorial celebrity could translate to social influence. This transformation from despised slave to celebrated performer illustrated one of Roman society's most fascinating contradictions: the simultaneous elevation and degradation of those who fought in the arena. The psychological cost of this success was considerable. Each victory required killing or severely injuring fellow human beings. Men who were often as innocent as you of any crime beyond being born in the wrong place at the wrong time. The faces of defeated opponents haunted your sleep, and you began to understand why many veteran gladiators turned to wine or philosophy in their private hours. After your 15th victory, Maximus offered you a choice that many gladiators never received: the opportunity to purchase your freedom. The price was substantial, requiring you to continue fighting for several more years to earn the necessary funds, but it represented hope for a future beyond the arena. You accepted, understanding that this goal would sustain you through whatever trials lay ahead. Now lying on your cot in the Ludus, you count the victories that have brought you to this point. 18 successful fights, each one a step closer to freedom, each one a demonstration that you have not merely survived your enslavement, but transformed it into a pathway towards something approaching your original dignity. Tomorrow's training will prepare you for the next fight, the next crowd, the next opportunity to prove that even in bondage, a warrior's spirit can endure and ultimately triumph. The man who was once called Wolfram sleeps fitfully, dreaming of pine forests and Roman crowds with equal frequency, while the gladiator known as Lupus prepares for another day in service to an empire that has made him both prisoner and celebrity, slave and hero in the endless theater of the arena. Beneath the polished spectacle that crowds witness from their marble seats lies a labyrinthine world of secrets, forgotten rituals, and archaeological mysteries that would not be fully understood until centuries after the last gladiator fell in the sand. As you rest during the quiet hours between training sessions, Older gladiators sometimes speak in hushed tones about the strange discoveries made during arena renovations, the unexplained chambers found deep beneath the Colosseum's foundations, and the ancient practices that predate Rome's gladiatorial games by hundreds of years. The Hypogeum, the underground complex beneath the arena floor, represents one of history's most sophisticated stage machinery systems. From your perspective as a gladiator, you glimpse only fragments of this hidden world. The sudden appearance of wild animals through trapdoors, the mechanical elevators that lift elaborate set pieces into view, and the complex system of tunnels that allows fighters to appear and disappear as if by magic. But the full scope of this underground marvel remains largely mysterious, even to those who work within its depths. During one memorable afternoon, while waiting in a holding cell beneath the arena floor, you overheard a conversation between two of the arena's technical supervisors. They spoke of chambers that seemed to serve no practical purpose, decorated with symbols that predated Roman occupation of the site, stone carvings depicting figures engaged in ritualistic combat, but wearing armor and carrying weapons unlike anything used in contemporary gladiatorial games. These discoveries suggested that the Colosseum's location had been sacred long before Emperor Vespasian ordered its construction. The elevator systems themselves represent engineering achievements that border on the miraculous. Counterweight mechanisms, operated by teams of slaves working in coordinated precision, can lift a full-grown elephant from the depths of the Hypogeum to arena level in less than a minute. The timing required to synchronize these appearances with the rhythm of gladiatorial combat demands split-second coordination between operators who cannot see the arena floor and must rely entirely on acoustic signals passed through speaking tubes carved into the stone. Archaeological evidence, though you could not know it in your lifetime, would later reveal that the arena's underground chambers contained religious shrines dedicated to deities from across the empire. Small altars to Mithras, the soldier's god, stood alongside offerings to Egyptian Isis and Germanic war deities whose names were carved in runic scripts. These discoveries suggest that gladiators and arena workers maintained complex spiritual practices that blended traditional Roman religion with beliefs from their homelands. One particularly intriguing mystery surrounds the arena's drainage system. The sophistication of the engineering is evident. Blood, water from staged naval battles, and other fluids disappear quickly through hidden channels carved into the arena floor. But the destination of these drainage tunnels has never been fully mapped. Some lead to the Tiber River, as expected, but others disappear into natural cave systems that extend far beyond the Colosseum's immediate vicinity. During your years in the Ludus, you've heard whispers about gladiators who simply vanished. Not those killed in combat, their fates were public and well documented, but fighters who disappeared between fights, leaving behind only their equipment and confused fellow gladiators. Official records typically attributed such disappearances to escape attempts, but the stories told in quiet voices suggested something more mysterious. Some gladiators claimed to have seen figures moving through tunnels that didn't appear on any known maps of the Hypogeum. The ritual aspects of gladiatorial combat extend far beyond what spectators observe. Before each games, priests conduct elaborate ceremonies in chambers deep beneath the arena. These rituals involve sacrifices to ensure favor from the gods, but they also include practices that seem to blend Roman religious traditions with much older ceremonies. Inscriptions found in these chambers, written in languages that even educated Romans cannot fully decipher, suggest connections to pre-Roman Italian cultures whose practices were absorbed rather than eliminated by Roman conquest. The sand that covers the arena floor itself carries mysteries. The composition is carefully maintained, not ordinary sand, but a specific mixture that includes materials sourced from various parts of the empire. Egyptian sand for its fineness, volcanic ash from Vesuvius for its absorbent properties, and crushed marble dust that gives the surface its distinctive appearance under sunlight. But arena workers also add ingredients that serve less practical purposes: herbs associated with various deities, powdered bone from sacrificial animals, and mineral compounds that create specific colors when mixed with blood. Some gladiators develop an almost supernatural sensitivity to the arena environment. Veterans claim they can sense changes in the underground chambers even while fighting on the surface. Subtle vibrations that indicate machinery being prepared, shifts in air pressure that suggest trapdoors being opened, and acoustic phenomena that provide advance warning of surprises being prepared for the crowd's entertainment. Whether these abilities represent genuine sensitivity or psychological adaptation to a dangerous environment remains debatable, but their practical value is undeniable. The medical facilities associated with the arena complex reveal another layer of mystery. The quality of surgical tools and medical knowledge available to gladiators often exceeds what is available to ordinary Roman citizens. Physicians attached to major ludus schools possess expertise in trauma surgery that seems remarkably advanced, leading to speculation about medical knowledge acquired through sources not available to conventional Roman medicine. Some treatments involve herbs and compounds imported from distant provinces, suggesting medical networks that span the entire empire. Archaeological investigations conducted long after your time would reveal that the Colosseum's foundation stones were positioned according to astronomical alignments that have no apparent practical purpose. The building's orientation corresponds to specific star positions during certain times of year, and hidden chambers contain stone circles arranged in patterns that mirror celestial configurations. These discoveries suggest that the arena's designers incorporated beliefs and practices from cultures that viewed combat as a sacred activity connected to cosmic forces. The animal facilities beneath the arena represent another puzzle. The sophistication of the veterinary care, the complexity of the feeding systems, and the elaborate housing arrangements for exotic creatures indicate investment far beyond what would be necessary for simple spectacle. Some chambers appear designed for animals that historical records don't mention in connection with gladiatorial games, species that would have been extraordinarily difficult to transport to Rome and maintain in captivity. This suggests that the arena's animal programs may have served purposes beyond public entertainment. Documents discovered in sealed chambers beneath the Colosseum include records written in coded languages that have never been fully deciphered. These texts appear to detail gladiatorial matches that don't correspond to any public games recorded in official histories. They describe combats involving unusual weapons, fighters with extraordinary abilities, and contests that seem more ritualistic than entertaining. Whether these represent secret games for elite audiences or records of religious ceremonies remains unclear. The acoustic properties of the arena continue to puzzle investigators. The Colosseum's design allows whispered conversations in certain underground chambers to be heard clearly in other locations, while normal speech in some areas becomes completely inaudible just a few feet away. These acoustic anomalies appear intentional, suggesting a communication system more sophisticated than simple speaking tubes. Some chambers amplify sound in ways that create almost supernatural effects, leading to speculation about their use in religious or ceremonial contexts. Water systems within the hypogeum include channels that seem to serve no practical drainage purpose. These waterways maintain constant flow, but their sources and destinations remain mysterious. Some appear to connect with natural springs that were sacred to pre-Roman peoples, while others link to underground streams whose courses extend far beyond the city limits. The symbolic significance of water in gladiatorial contexts may have been more important than practical considerations. As you lie in your cell, listening to the distant sounds of the city above, you sometimes hear other noises that seem to come from deeper underground. Mechanical sounds that don't correspond to any known arena equipment. Voices speaking in languages you don't recognize, and musical tones that might be wind through unknown passages, or something more intentional. These acoustic mysteries remind you that the arena contains depths that remain unexplored, purposes that extend beyond entertainment, and connections to Rome's hidden history that few living people fully understand. The Brotherhood of Gladiators maintains its own oral traditions about these mysteries. Stories passed from veteran fighters to newcomers describe encounters with figures who don't appear in official records, physicians with extraordinary skills, trainers who seem to possess knowledge beyond normal martial expertise, and individuals who appear occasionally in the underground chambers but are never seen in daylight. Whether these tales represent genuine experiences or the kind of legends that develop in any closed community remains an open question. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, the stone walls around you seem to pulse with the weight of accumulated history. The arena above your head has witnessed thousands of deaths, countless moments of triumph and tragedy, and ceremonies whose full significance may never be completely understood. The mysteries that surround gladiatorial life extend far beyond the simple question of who lives and who dies in the sand. They touch on fundamental questions about the intersection of entertainment and religion, the relationship between Roman civilization and the cultures it absorbed, and the hidden purposes that great buildings serve long after their original functions have been forgotten. While you toil in the sand and stone of the ludus, preparing your body for another potential death in service to Roman entertainment, the city above pulses with the rhythms of a different existence entirely. In marble villas that sprawl across the Palatine and Aventine hills, Rome's elite conduct their own elaborate performances, social rituals as carefully choreographed as any gladiatorial combat, though the weapons employed are wit, wealth, and political influence rather than steel and shield. Senator Marcus Crassus Dives awakens this morning in chambers that could house your entire gladiator barracks. His bedroom walls are adorned with frescoes depicting mythological scenes painted by artists whose names will survive longer than those of most emperors. Slaves, different from gladiators in that they will likely never face public death for entertainment, attend to his morning ablutions with imported soaps, scented with Arabian frankincense and Egyptian myrrh. The water for his bath is heated to precise temperatures and infused with oils that cost more than most Roman citizens earn in a year. His morning ritual includes a light breakfast of delicacies that represent the breadth of Roman conquest. Oysters from British shores, dates from Palestinian groves, wine from Gallic vineyards, and honey from Sicilian apiaries. Each bite represents not just sustenance, but a demonstration of empire's reach and his position within its hierarchy. While you consume barley porridge and coarse bread, Crassus enjoys foods that have traveled thousands of miles to reach his table. The senator's day begins with the salutatio, the morning reception where clients and petitioners gather in his atrium seeking favor, assistance, or simply acknowledgement. These men, for they are almost exclusively men, represent a complex web of obligation and mutual dependence that binds Roman society together. Former slaves who owe their freedom to Crassus's intervention, ambitious young men seeking political sponsorship, merchants hoping for favorable business arrangements, and fellow senators negotiating the endless compromises that keep the Republic functioning. As Crassus receives these morning visitors, reclining on a couch that cost more than your potential freedom price, the conversation inevitably turns to the upcoming gladiatorial games. Not because these men share your intimate knowledge of combat techniques or arena politics, but because the games represent social opportunities as complex as any military campaign. Which senator will sponsor the most spectacular entertainment? Who will sit in the most prominent seats? Which gladiators will be favored, and how much money will change hands through betting on the outcomes? I hear that Germanic fighter, the one they call Lupus, is scheduled for the afternoon matches. Mentions Gaius Aurelius Minor, a banker whose wealth derives from loans to less fortunate senators. My sources suggest he's being groomed for something special. Perhaps a match against multiple opponents, or one of those elaborate staged hunts. Crassus nods thoughtfully. Your reputation has reached even these elevated circles, though you remain as distant from their world as the stars. To them, you represent an investment opportunity, a subject for casual betting, and a source of entertainment that adds spice to their social gatherings. The irony that your potential death provides amusement for their dinner parties would not occur to most of them. Gladiators exist in a category so removed from their daily experience that the human cost rarely registers as more than abstract statistics. The morning reception concludes, and Crassus prepares for his journey to the Forum, the beating heart of Roman political and commercial life. His litter, carried by 8 specially trained slaves and accompanied by a retinue of bodyguards and secretaries, moves through streets that tell the story of empire in architecture and activity. Past temples dedicated to gods from every corner of the known world. Through markets where merchants sell goods from Britain to India. Around construction sites where new monuments rise to commemorate military victories and political achievements. In the Forum, Crassus conducts the real business of Roman governance, not the formal proceedings of the Senate, which often serve merely to ratify decisions already made in private negotiations, but the complex web of deals, alliances, and compromises that actually determine imperial policy. A whispered conversation near the Temple of Vesta settles a dispute over grain imports from Egypt. A seemingly casual encounter by the Basilica Julia arranges financing for a new aqueduct project. A brief exchange of glances during a public sacrifice communicates agreement on judicial appointments that will affect thousands of lives. These negotiations occur against a backdrop of casual brutality that Romans accept as natural as weather. Slaves who displease their masters disappear without legal consequence. Debtors who cannot meet their obligations face sale into bondage. Political enemies suffer exile, property confiscation, or worse, depending on the current balance of power. The same society that produces magnificent art, sophisticated philosophy, and engineering marvels maintains its stability through systematic application of violence that makes gladiatorial combat seem almost gentle by comparison. Yet even within this harsh framework, the Roman elite maintain elaborate codes of honor, hospitality, and civic responsibility. Crassus genuinely believes that his wealth and position create obligations to support public works, sponsor religious ceremonies, and provide entertainment for the masses. The gladiatorial games he finances represent, in his mind, a form of public service comparable to building temples or funding military expeditions. The fact that this service requires human beings to kill each other for spectacle strikes him as no more morally problematic than requiring soldiers to die for territorial expansion. As the day progresses, Crassus visits his private baths, a complex that rivals any public facility and serves as an informal center for political networking. Here, in the steamy atmosphere of the Caldarium, surrounded by friends and allies in various states of undress, the senator discusses matters that would never be mentioned in formal settings. Military preparations for upcoming campaigns, strategies for dealing with provincial unrest, and assessments of potential threats to Roman stability flow as freely as the heated water. The conversation returns repeatedly to gladiatorial topics, but from perspectives that would be alien to anyone who actually fights in the arena. These men discuss gladiators as they might discuss racehorses, analyzing breeding, training methods, and performance statistics without any real consideration of the fighters as individual human beings. Your Germanic heritage becomes a topic of scholarly interest, with learned discourse about whether northern barbarians possess natural fighting advantages over Mediterranean peoples. Your combat record prompts discussion of statistical models for predicting gladiatorial success rates. The interesting question, observes Lucius Flavius Maximus, a former military commander turned political philosopher, is whether gladiatorial combat represents a degradation of Roman military virtues or their purest expression. These fighters display courage, skill, and honor in their willingness to face death for public entertainment. In some ways, they embody Roman ideals more completely than those of us who enjoy the spectacle from safe seats. This philosophical observation generates considerable debate, as Roman intellectuals enjoy few things more than abstract discussions about moral principles. Some argue that gladiatorial combat corrupts public morals by making entertainment from human suffering. Others contend that the games serve essential social functions by providing outlets for violent impulses that might otherwise destabilize civil order. A few suggest that gladiators represent the ultimate expression of Roman virtues, courage in the face of certain death. None of these philosophical discussions acknowledge the basic reality that you and your fellow gladiators experience daily. That you are human beings forced into mortal combat for others' amusement, regardless of whatever broader social functions that combat might serve. The intellectual distance that allows educated Romans to debate gladiatorial ethics without considering gladiatorial humanity represents one of the most characteristic features of Roman elite culture. Evening brings the most elaborate social ritual of the Roman day, the dinner party, or cena, where political alliances are forged, business deals are negotiated, and cultural refinement is displayed through carefully orchestrated entertainment. Crassus's dining room can accommodate 24 guests, each reclining on couches arranged to facilitate conversation, while slaves serve courses that represent culinary artistry at its most sophisticated level. Tonight's menu includes delicacies that would seem fantastical to anyone outside Rome's elite circles. Peacock prepared with exotic spices from Indian markets, wine aged in amphorae buried for decades in specialized cellars, fruits preserved through techniques that allow out-of-season consumption, and elaborate desserts that require teams of skilled cooks working in coordination. The meal represents not just sustenance, but a demonstration of wealth, taste, and connection to imperial trade networks that span 3 continents. As the evening progresses and wine flows more freely, conversation becomes more intimate and revealing. Guests discuss their fears about increasing barbarian pressure along frontier territories, speculation about succession politics within the imperial family, and concerns about economic instability caused by military expenses. These topics, which would be treasonous if discussed publicly, flow naturally in the protected environment of private hospitality. The gladiatorial games scheduled for next week become a recurring topic, but always in contexts that emphasize their social rather than human dimensions. Who will attend? Where they will sit? What political messages might be communicated through choice of entertainment, and how the games might affect various senators' public reputations. The fighters themselves, including you, remain abstract figures in these discussions, no more real than characters in theatrical performances. As midnight approaches and guests prepare to depart, carried home in litters through streets patrolled by private guards and public watchmen, the contrast between their world and yours becomes starkest. They return to beds warmed by slave-tended braziers, in homes protected by armed guards, secure in the knowledge that their wealth and status provide insulation from most forms of danger. You lie on a simple cot in a stone cell, aware that tomorrow might bring death in front of cheering crowds, your survival dependent entirely on skills honed through years of preparation for moments that last only minutes. Yet both worlds exist within the same city, sustained by the same imperial system, connected by invisible threads of economic dependence and social hierarchy. The taxes that fund gladiatorial games come partly from the estates that employ free laborers who attend those games. The victories that fill imperial coffers provide both the wealth that builds elite villas and the captives who fight in their courtyards. The political stability that allows senators to conduct elaborate dinner parties depends partly on the social outlets provided by public entertainment, including the spectacles where gladiators die for mass amusement. In the quiet hours before dawn, as both elite and gladiator prepare for another day in their respective roles, the great machine of empire continues its operation. Built on foundations of systematic violence, sustained by careful distributions of wealth and privilege, and maintained through complex balances of power and entertainment, Roman civilization represents humanity's most sophisticated attempt to organize diverse peoples under unified authority. That this achievement requires some individuals to die for others' entertainment strikes most Romans as a reasonable price for unprecedented peace, prosperity, and cultural achievement. The senator sleeps soundly in his comfortable bed, dreaming perhaps of political advancement and social recognition. The gladiator rests fitfully in his stone cell, aware that his dreams of freedom depend on continued survival in contests designed to produce spectacular deaths. Both are integral components of the same system, though only one faces the possibility of dying tomorrow for the amusement of strangers. As the first light of another Roman dawn creeps through the narrow windows of the ludus, you stir from dreams filled with sand and steel, crowds and combat. The familiar weight of your existence settles over you like well-worn armor. The knowledge that you are simultaneously the most celebrated and most expendable of Rome's inhabitants, a warrior slave whose fame depends entirely on your willingness to face death for the entertainment of others. The sounds of the awakening city drift through the stone walls that define your world. Merchants calling their wares in the early morning markets, the rumble of cartwheels on paved streets, the distant laughter of free citizens, beginning another day of choices and possibilities that remain forever beyond your reach. Yet within these confines, you have discovered something that perhaps even Rome senators lack: the clarity that comes from knowing exactly what is expected of you, and the honor that can be found in meeting those expectations with courage and skill. Your journey from Germanic warrior to Roman gladiator represents more than personal transformation. It mirrors the broader story of how Rome absorbs, transforms, and ultimately transcends the cultures it encounters. The boy who once hunted in northern forests now fights with Mediterranean tactics. The tribal warrior who once served clan loyalty now performs for imperial entertainment. The free man who once chose his battles now faces opponents selected by others. Yet something essential remains unchanged: the fundamental human capacity to find meaning and dignity even in circumstances not of your own choosing. The mysteries that surround gladiatorial life extend beyond the hidden chambers beneath the arena floor. They encompass the psychological mechanisms that allow human beings to adapt to extreme circumstances, the social systems that can simultaneously celebrate and condemn the same individuals, and the cultural contradictions that permit sophisticated civilizations to base their entertainment on human suffering. These mysteries will outlive the Roman Empire itself, recurring wherever societies struggle to balance individual dignity with collective needs. As you prepare to face another day of training, another step toward your next fight, another moment in the strange existence that Rome has created for you, consider the broader currents that your life represents. You are simultaneously victim and hero, slave and celebrity, barbarian and Roman. Your story embodies the tensions and contradictions that define imperial civilization at its most complex and troubling. The warm Mediterranean sun that soon will heat the training ground also shines on forests where Germanic tribes continue their ancient ways on Egyptian fields, where farmers tend crops that feed Roman cities, and on distant frontiers where new captives begin journeys that might end in ludus schools like your own. The arena connects you to all of these places and peoples, making you a participant in the vast human drama that is Roman expansion and cultural transformation. Rest now, gladiator. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own opportunities for honor or death, its own chances to demonstrate that even in bondage, human dignity can survive and even flourish. The sand awaits, the crowd will gather, and you will take your place in the eternal theater where courage and skill measure themselves against fate and fortune. In the growing light of this Roman morning, you are exactly where history has placed you, at the intersection of civilization and barbarism, freedom and slavery, life and death. Sleep comes slowly, but when it arrives, it brings the peace that belongs to those who have found their place in the world, however strange and challenging that place might be. The arena calls, but for now, there is rest and dreams, and the quiet satisfaction of another day survived in service to the endless entertainment of empire. Prepare to have your mind blown as we uncover the shocking truth. Ancient Egyptians were pioneers in medicine, developing sophisticated techniques that eerily resemble our modern approaches. From surgery to pharmacology, their innovations weren't just primitive remedies, but groundbreaking advancements that shaped the future of healing. Picture yourself walking into a modern hospital. The sterile corridors echo with the soft beeping of monitors, the gentle shuffle of nurses' feet, and the quiet murmur of medical consultations. You watch as a surgeon carefully examines a patient's wound, methodically documenting symptoms, considering treatment options, and prescribing specific medications based on careful observation. Now, imagine that this same systematic approach to healing was being practiced not decades or centuries ago, but over 4,000 years ago along the banks of the Nile River. This is not mere speculation or romantic historical fiction. When you hold a modern prescription bottle, when you undergo a surgical procedure, when you visit a specialist for a particular ailment, you are participating in medical traditions that can trace their lineage directly back to ancient Egypt. The question that will guide our exploration tonight is both simple and profound. Did ancient Egypt truly invent our modern medicine, or were they simply among history's earliest practitioners of healing arts? The distinction is crucial, and as we journey together through the evidence, you'll discover that the answer lies somewhere in the fascinating middle ground between invention and innovation. The ancient Egyptians didn't create modern medicine as we know it today, but they established many of the fundamental principles, practices, and approaches that would eventually evolve into our current medical system. Imagine yourself as a time traveler, stepping into the Egypt of 2600 BCE. The Great Pyramid of Giza is still centuries from being built, yet already in the workshops and healing houses scattered throughout the kingdom, physicians are developing techniques that would seem remarkably familiar to any modern doctor. They are systematically cataloging diseases, creating detailed treatment protocols, specializing in different areas of medicine, and even conducting what we might recognize today as clinical observations. The warm Egyptian sun beats down on papyrus scrolls, where medical knowledge is being carefully recorded in hieroglyphic script. These aren't simple folk remedies or magical incantations, though those certainly existed alongside the more scientific approaches. Instead, these documents represent something revolutionary for their time: the systematic study of human anatomy, disease patterns, and therapeutic interventions. Consider the sophistication required to develop a medical system that included specialized doctors for different parts of the body. While most of the ancient world relied on general healers or spiritual practitioners, Egyptian physicians were already dividing into specialists. There were doctors who focused exclusively on eyes, others who specialized in dental problems, and still others who became experts in surgery or internal medicine. This level of specialization suggests not just advanced medical knowledge, but an understanding that different conditions required different expertise. The Egyptian approach to medicine was revolutionary in its combination of empirical observation and systematic documentation. Where other ancient civilizations might rely primarily on supernatural explanations for illness, Egyptian physicians spent considerable time observing symptoms, noting which treatments worked, and passing this knowledge down through written records. They understood that certain herbs consistently helped with specific conditions, that particular surgical techniques yielded better results than others, and that prevention could be just as important as cure. As you drift deeper into this ancient world, imagine the daily life of an Egyptian physician. They would begin their day by examining patients, carefully noting symptoms in a manner that would seem familiar to any modern doctor conducting rounds. They would consult their medical papyri, thick scrolls containing centuries of accumulated medical wisdom, much as today's physicians might reference medical textbooks or databases. They would prepare medicines from carefully measured ingredients, following precise recipes that had been tested and refined over generations. The tools of their trade, while simpler than modern instruments, served remarkably similar functions. Bronze knives for surgery, wooden splints for broken bones, linen bandages for wound care, and an extensive pharmacopoeia of plant, mineral, and animal-derived medicines. Many of these tools and techniques would remain largely unchanged for thousands of years, a testament to their effectiveness. But perhaps most importantly, Egyptian physicians approached their craft with what we might recognize today as scientific thinking. They believed that diseases had natural causes and could be treated through natural means. While they certainly incorporated religious and magical elements into their practice, as was common in all aspects of ancient life. The core of their medical system was based on observation, experimentation, and logical reasoning. The society that produced these medical innovations was itself remarkable in its complexity and organization. Ancient Egypt was not a primitive civilization struggling with basic survival, but a sophisticated culture with extensive trade networks, advanced engineering capabilities, and complex social structures. This societal sophistication created the conditions necessary for medical advancement. A stable government could support dedicated physicians. Extensive trade networks could provide access to medicinal plants from distant lands, and advanced engineering could create the tools necessary for surgical procedures. As we prepare to delve deeper into specific Egyptian medical achievements, take a moment to consider the intellectual courage required to develop these approaches. In a world where disease was commonly attributed to angry gods or evil spirits, Egyptian physicians chose to look for natural patterns and causes. They dissected bodies to understand anatomy, tested different treatments to see which worked best, and carefully recorded their findings for future generations. This was the foundation upon which all subsequent medical advancement would be built. When Greek physicians like Hippocrates began developing their medical theories centuries later, they were building upon knowledge that had been accumulating in Egypt for over 2,000 years. When Islamic scholars preserved and expanded medical knowledge during the Middle Ages, they were working with texts that traced back to Egyptian sources. When Renaissance physicians began to challenge medieval medical doctrines, they often found support for their new ideas in ancient Egyptian practices that had been forgotten or misunderstood. The question of whether ancient Egypt invented modern medicine becomes clearer when we understand it not as a single moment of discovery, but as the beginning of a long process of medical evolution. The Egyptians didn't invent modern medicine any more than the Wright brothers invented modern aviation, or Alexander Graham Bell invented modern telecommunications. But like these later innovators, the ancient Egyptians created the fundamental breakthroughs that made all future advancement possible. As you settle more comfortably into this journey through time, prepare to discover specific examples of Egyptian medical innovation that will surprise and delight you. We'll explore medical papyri that read like modern textbooks, surgical techniques that wouldn't be out of place in a contemporary operating room, and pharmaceutical knowledge that anticipated discoveries we thought were uniquely modern. The story of Egyptian medicine is not just a chapter in medical history. It's the opening volume of a story that continues to unfold in hospitals and clinics around the world today. As we transition from this broad overview to specific examples, let your mind wander through the dusty corridors of ancient healing temples, where the first systematic approach to medicine was taking shape. The foundations were being laid for everything that would follow, from the Hippocratic Oath to modern surgical procedures, from pharmaceutical research to specialized medical training. The journey of medical discovery that began in ancient Egypt continues today in every prescription written, every diagnosis made, and every life saved through the application of medical knowledge. As we continue our gentle journey through the corridors of ancient medical wisdom, imagine yourself in the quiet halls of an Egyptian temple library. The air is cool and dry, perfect for preserving the delicate papyrus scrolls that contain thousands of years of accumulated medical knowledge. Here, in these sacred repositories of healing wisdom, lie documents that would revolutionize our understanding of ancient medicine and its connections to modern practice. Picture yourself carefully unrolling one of the most remarkable medical documents ever discovered, the Edwin Smith Papyrus. Dating to around 1600 BCE, though copying much older material, this extraordinary scroll stretches over 15 feet in length and contains what can only be described as the world's first systematic surgical textbook. As your eyes follow the elegant hieroglyphic script, you realize you're looking at something that would seem remarkably familiar to any modern trauma surgeon. The Edwin Smith Papyrus approaches medical cases with a methodical precision that anticipates modern clinical thinking by millennia. Each case begins with a careful examination of the patient, followed by a detailed description of symptoms, then a diagnosis, and finally a treatment recommendation. The document contains 48 different cases, each dealing with traumatic injuries from head to spine, organized in a logical anatomical sequence from top to bottom. What makes this papyrus so extraordinary is not just its systematic approach, but its remarkably scientific methodology. The ancient author distinguishes clearly between conditions that can be treated, those that might be helped with careful intervention, and those that are beyond the physician's ability to heal. This honest assessment of medical limitations demonstrates a level of clinical judgment that we associate with modern evidence-based medicine. Imagine the careful observations that went into creating this document. The Egyptian physician who compiled this knowledge had clearly examined hundreds, perhaps thousands, of patients with traumatic injuries. They understood that a wound to the head might cause symptoms in distant parts of the body, that spinal injuries could result in paralysis, and that certain types of fractures healed better with specific treatments than others. The papyrus describes surgical procedures with remarkable precision. It details how to examine a patient with a head wound, noting that the physician should feel for bone fragments, assess the patient's ability to speak and move, and even check for what we would now recognize as signs of brain injury. The treatments recommended include cleaning wounds, applying medicinal dressings, and in some cases, surgical intervention to remove bone fragments or drain accumulated blood. One particularly fascinating case describes a patient with a gaping wound in the throat that has severed the esophagus. The ancient physician notes that when the patient tries to swallow, liquid comes out of the wound opening. This level of anatomical understanding and careful observation rivals anything found in medical literature until well into the modern era. The Edwin Smith Papyrus also reveals sophisticated understanding of human anatomy that could only have come from systematic dissection and study. The document accurately describes the structure of the skull, the nature of the brain, and the relationship between the spine and limb function. This anatomical knowledge was not based on speculation or theoretical models, but on direct observation and hands-on experience. Now let your attention drift to another remarkable document, the Ebers Papyrus. If the Edwin Smith Papyrus can be considered the world's first surgical textbook, then the Ebers Papyrus represents the earliest comprehensive medical encyclopedia. This massive document, containing over 100 columns of text and dating to approximately 1550 BCE, covers virtually every aspect of ancient Egyptian medicine. The Ebers Papyrus reads like a combination of modern medical textbook, pharmaceutical reference, and treatment manual. It contains over 700 different remedies for conditions ranging from simple cuts and bruises to complex internal disorders. What's remarkable about this document is not just its comprehensiveness, but its systematic organization and careful attention to dosage, preparation methods, and treatment protocols. Imagine yourself as an ancient Egyptian physician consulting this vast medical resource. You would find detailed descriptions of hundreds of different medicinal plants, careful instructions for preparing complex pharmaceutical compounds, and specific protocols for treating everything from eye infections to digestive disorders. The level of pharmaceutical knowledge demonstrated in this papyrus rivals that of many medical traditions that developed thousands of years later. The papyrus reveals that Egyptian physicians had developed sophisticated understanding of drug interactions, dosage calculations, and treatment timing. Many remedies specify not just what ingredients to use, but exactly how much of each component, how to prepare them, and how frequently to administer the resulting medicine. This attention to pharmaceutical precision demonstrates a level of medical sophistication that we tend to associate with much more recent medical developments. Some of the treatments described in the Ebers Papyrus seem remarkably modern in their approach. The document describes using honey as an antiseptic for wounds, a practice that modern research has confirmed to be highly effective due to honey's natural antibacterial properties. It recommends willow bark for pain relief, which we now know contains salicin, a compound closely related to aspirin. It even describes using moldy bread on infections, anticipating the discovery of antibiotics by thousands of years. The papyrus also reveals sophisticated understanding of what we would now call preventive medicine. It includes recommendations for maintaining health through proper diet, exercise, and hygiene. The document emphasizes the importance of clean water, proper waste disposal, and regular bathing, demonstrating that Egyptian physicians understood the connection between cleanliness and health long before the development of germ theory. But perhaps most impressive is the papyrus's approach to diagnosis. Egyptian physicians had developed systematic methods for examining patients that included checking pulse, observing skin color and texture, examining urine and other bodily fluids, and carefully questioning patients about their symptoms. This diagnostic approach bears striking resemblance to modern clinical examination techniques. The concept of medical specialization, so fundamental to modern medicine, was already well established in ancient Egypt. The papyri and other sources reveal that Egyptian physicians had divided into numerous specialties, each requiring extensive training and expertise. There were physicians who specialized exclusively in diseases of the eye, others who focused on dental problems, and still others who became experts in women's health, pediatrics, or surgery. This medical specialization extended far beyond what we might expect from an ancient civilization. Egyptian physicians had developed distinct specialties for treating different parts of the body, different types of diseases, and even different patient populations. There were court physicians who specialized in treating the royal family, military physicians who focused on battle injuries, and temple physicians who combined medical practice with religious duties. The training required to become a specialized Egyptian physician was extensive and systematic. Medical students would spend years learning to read and write hieroglyphic medical texts, memorizing hundreds of treatment protocols, and practicing diagnostic techniques under the supervision of experienced physicians. This formalized medical education system provided the foundation for consistent, high-quality medical care across the Egyptian empire. The role of the SWNW, the Egyptian physician, was both prestigious and demanding. These medical practitioners were expected to maintain extensive knowledge of anatomy, pharmacology, and surgical techniques, while also serving as teachers and researchers who would advance medical understanding for future generations. The best Egyptian physicians were known throughout the ancient world, and their expertise was sought by foreign rulers and dignitaries. As you drift deeper into contemplation of these ancient medical achievements, consider the intellectual framework that made such advancement possible. Egyptian physicians had developed what we might recognize today as evidence-based thinking. They observed which treatments worked, documented their successes and failures, and constantly refined their approaches based on accumulated experience. This empirical approach to medicine was revolutionary for its time. While most ancient cultures attributed disease to supernatural causes, Egyptian physicians sought natural explanations and natural remedies. They believed that careful observation and logical thinking could unlock the mysteries of human health and disease, an approach that would not become widespread in other parts of the world for many centuries. The preservation of medical knowledge in written form allowed Egyptian physicians to build upon the work of their predecessors in ways that purely oral medical traditions could not match. Each generation of physicians could study the accumulated wisdom of centuries past, add their own discoveries and refinements, and pass this expanded knowledge onto their students. As we prepare to explore the specific surgical and pharmaceutical achievements of ancient Egyptian medicine, let your mind rest in the comfortable knowledge that the systematic scientific approach to healing that we take for granted today has roots stretching back over 4,000 years. The careful observations, detailed documentation, and evidence-based thinking of ancient Egyptian physicians created the foundation upon which all subsequent medical advancement would be built. As our journey through ancient Egyptian medicine continues, imagine yourself standing in a well-lit chamber within a temple complex, where the most skilled physicians of the ancient world are practicing their craft. The room is meticulously clean, with bronze instruments gleaming in the filtered sunlight, while the air carries the subtle fragrance of medicinal herbs and the reassuring presence of accumulated wisdom. Picture yourself observing an Egyptian surgeon preparing for a complex procedure. Their hands move with practiced precision as they arrange their instruments. Bronze knives of various sizes, wooden splints perfectly carved and smoothed, forceps designed for delicate work, and needles crafted for suturing wounds. The level of surgical sophistication you're witnessing would not look entirely out of place in a modern operating room, though it's taking place over 4,000 years ago. The archaeological evidence for Egyptian surgical expertise is both extensive and impressive. Mummified remains show clear evidence of successful surgical interventions, including healed fractures that were properly set, amputations that healed cleanly, and even evidence of surgical procedures on the skull. These mummified patients didn't just survive their surgeries, they lived for years or even decades afterward, demonstrating that Egyptian surgeons had mastered not just the techniques of cutting and suturing, but the crucial art of preventing infection and promoting proper healing. Consider the remarkable case of bone setting, a surgical skill that Egyptian physicians had refined to an extraordinary degree. Archaeological examination of ancient Egyptian remains reveals fractures that were set with precision that rivals modern orthopedic surgery. The bones show evidence of proper alignment, appropriate immobilization during healing, and successful long-term recovery. This level of success could only have been achieved through extensive anatomical knowledge, sophisticated understanding of bone healing, and considerable surgical experience. Egyptian surgeons had developed specialized techniques for different types of fractures. For simple breaks, they used carefully crafted wooden splints held in place with linen bandages soaked in resin, creating a cast-like structure that provided proper support during healing. For more complex fractures, they developed traction devices and other mechanical aids that could maintain proper bone alignment over the weeks or months required for healing. The practice of trepanation, perhaps the most dramatic surgical procedure of the ancient world, was performed with remarkable skill by Egyptian surgeons. This procedure, involving the careful removal of sections of skull bone, was undertaken to relieve pressure from head injuries, treat certain neurological conditions, or remove bone fragments from traumatic wounds. Archaeological evidence shows that many patients survived this dramatic surgery, with clear signs of bone healing around the surgical sites. Imagine the level of anatomical understanding required to successfully perform skull surgery. Egyptian surgeons had to know exactly where they could safely cut, how deep they could go without damaging the brain, and how to manage bleeding during the procedure. They had developed specialized tools for this work, including bronze saws designed specifically for cutting bone and scrapers for smoothing rough edges. The sophistication of Egyptian prosthetics provides another window into their surgical capabilities. Archaeological discoveries have revealed artificial toes, fingers, and even legs that were carefully crafted to replace lost limbs. These prosthetics weren't merely cosmetic, they were functional devices designed to restore mobility and dexterity to their users. The famous artificial toe found on an Egyptian mummy shows clear signs of wear, indicating that it was actually used for walking rather than simply prepared for burial. The creation of functional prosthetics required intimate knowledge of human anatomy and biomechanics. Egyptian craftsmen had to understand how weight was distributed during walking, how joints moved during normal activity, and how to attach artificial limbs in ways that would remain secure during use. This knowledge could only have come from careful study of living patients and extensive experimentation with different designs and materials. Egyptian pharmaceutical knowledge was equally impressive in its scope and sophistication. The ancient physicians had identified and catalogued hundreds of medicinal substances, ranging from common plants that could be gathered locally to exotic materials imported from distant lands. Their pharmaceutical preparations included simple, single-ingredient remedies and complex compounds that combined dozens of different substances in carefully calculated proportions. The use of honey as a medical treatment demonstrates the sophisticated understanding Egyptian physicians had developed of natural antiseptics. Modern research has confirmed that honey possesses remarkable antibacterial properties, making it highly effective for treating wounds and preventing infection. Egyptian physicians used honey not just as a wound dressing, but as an ingredient in more complex pharmaceutical preparations designed to treat a wide variety of conditions. The Egyptian practice of using moldy bread on infected wounds represents one of the most prescient discoveries in ancient medicine. While the ancient physicians didn't understand the mechanism involved, they had observed that certain types of mold could help heal infections. Modern research has revealed that these molds produced natural antibiotics, making this ancient treatment a direct predecessor to modern antibiotic therapy. Consider the sophisticated pharmaceutical preparation described in the medical papyri. Egyptian physicians had developed precise recipes that specified not just the ingredients to be used, but exact quantities, preparation methods, and administration schedules. Many of these ancient prescriptions read remarkably like modern pharmaceutical protocols, with careful attention to dosage, contraindications, and potential side effects. The Egyptian pharmacopoeia included treatments that anticipated many modern pharmaceutical discoveries. Willow bark, rich in compounds related to aspirin, was used for pain relief and fever reduction. Opium poppies were employed for severe pain and as surgical anesthetics. Various plant-based compounds were used as diuretics, laxatives, and anti-inflammatory agents. Many of these natural remedies remain part of modern pharmaceutical practice, either in their original form or as synthetic derivatives. Egyptian physicians had also developed sophisticated understanding of drug interactions and contraindications. Their medical texts include warnings about which substances should not be combined, which treatments might be dangerous for pregnant women, and which remedies could cause harmful side effects in certain patients. This level of pharmaceutical sophistication suggests extensive clinical experience and careful observation of treatment outcomes. The concept of preventive medicine was well established in ancient Egyptian medical practice. Physicians understood that maintaining health was often easier than curing disease, and they developed comprehensive approaches to disease prevention that included dietary recommendations, exercise prescriptions, and lifestyle modifications. Egyptian medical texts emphasize the importance of moderation in eating and drinking, regular physical activity, and proper hygiene in maintaining good health. The Egyptian understanding of hygiene and its relationship to health was remarkably advanced for its time. Archaeological evidence reveals sophisticated water management systems, including elaborate bathroom facilities, drainage systems, and waste disposal methods. Egyptian cities were designed with public health in mind, incorporating features that would reduce the spread of disease and promote community wellness. Egyptian physicians had observed the connection between clean water and good health, leading to the development of water purification techniques that included filtration, boiling, and chemical treatment. They understood that stagnant water could harbor disease, and they designed irrigation and drainage systems that minimized the risk of waterborne illness. These public health measures contributed significantly to the relatively good health enjoyed by ancient Egyptians compared to many of their contemporaries. The practice of regular bathing was both a religious and medical ritual in ancient Egypt. Egyptian physicians understood that clean skin was less prone to infection and disease, and they developed a wide variety of soaps, oils, and cleansing agents designed to maintain skin health. These cosmetic and hygienic practices served important medical functions, even when their users didn't fully understand the mechanisms involved. As you reflect on these remarkable achievements in surgery and pharmaceutical practice, consider the intellectual framework that made such advancement possible. Egyptian physicians combined careful empirical observation with systematic documentation, creating a medical tradition that could build upon itself over generations. Each successful surgery, each effective remedy, each successful treatment became part of a growing body of knowledge that could be taught, refined, and improved upon. The surgical and pharmaceutical achievements of ancient Egyptian medicine weren't isolated discoveries, but part of a comprehensive medical system that integrated prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and rehabilitation. Egyptian physicians understood that effective medicine required not just knowledge of specific techniques, but understanding of how all aspects of health and healing worked together to promote patient welfare. As we prepare to explore how Egyptian medical knowledge influenced the development of medical thinking in other cultures, let your mind rest in the remarkable recognition that many of the most fundamental aspects of modern medical practice have their roots in the careful observations and patient experimentation of ancient Egyptian physicians. Their commitment to systematic study and evidence-based treatment created a foundation of medical knowledge that would influence healing practices for thousands of years to come. As we delve deeper into our exploration of medical history, imagine yourself standing at the crossroads of ancient wisdom and modern understanding. Here, in this liminal space between past and present, we can begin to see both the remarkable achievements of Egyptian medicine and the crucial developments that would transform healing from ancient practice into modern science. While the sophistication of Egyptian medicine was truly extraordinary for its time, it's important to understand the fundamental differences that separate ancient medical practice from modern scientific medicine. These differences don't diminish the achievements of ancient physicians, but rather help us appreciate the long journey of medical evolution and the unique contributions each era made to our current understanding of health and healing. The most significant difference between ancient Egyptian medicine and modern practice lies in their understanding of disease causation. Egyptian physicians, despite their empirical approach to treatment, lacked what we now consider the cornerstone of medical science, germ theory. They could observe that certain conditions spread from person to person, that some illnesses seemed to cluster in particular areas, and that certain practices reduced the likelihood of disease. However, they attributed these patterns to imbalances in the body, supernatural influences, or environmental factors rather than to microscopic pathogens. Imagine an Egyptian physician treating a patient with what we would now recognize as a bacterial infection. The physician might observe fever, swelling, and other symptoms with the same careful attention as a modern doctor. They might even prescribe treatments that we now know to be effective, such as honey for wound care or certain plant-based compounds with antimicrobial properties. However, their understanding of why these treatments worked was fundamentally different from ours. The Egyptian concept of disease was based on the idea of balance and imbalance within the body. They believed that health depended on the proper flow of bodily fluids and the maintenance of harmony between different physiological systems. While this holistic approach to health contained valuable insights that modern medicine is rediscovering, it couldn't provide the precise understanding of pathological mechanisms that modern medical science requires. This difference in disease theory had profound implications for treatment approaches. Egyptian physicians focused primarily on restoring balance through dietary modifications, herbal remedies, and physical interventions. While many of these treatments were effective, the physicians couldn't understand exactly why they worked or predict with precision which treatments would be most effective for specific conditions. The absence of controlled clinical trials represents another crucial difference between ancient and modern medicine. Egyptian physicians certainly observed treatment outcomes and modified their approaches based on experience, but they lacked the systematic methodology that modern medicine uses to determine treatment effectiveness. They couldn't control for variables, establish control groups, or conduct double-blind studies that would eliminate bias and provide reliable evidence of treatment efficacy. Consider how this limitation affected the development of pharmaceutical knowledge. An Egyptian physician might observe that a particular herbal remedy seemed to help patients with certain symptoms, but they couldn't determine whether the improvement was due to the specific herb, other aspects of the treatment regimen, natural recovery processes, or psychological factors. This meant that effective treatments might be mixed with ineffective ones in their medical protocols, and potentially harmful remedies might persist alongside beneficial ones. Despite these limitations, the influence of Egyptian medical knowledge on later medical traditions was profound and lasting. As trade networks expanded and empires rose and fell, Egyptian medical wisdom spread throughout the ancient world, influencing the development of medical thought in Greece, Rome, and eventually throughout Europe and beyond. The transmission of Egyptian medical knowledge to ancient Greece represents one of the most important chapters in medical history. Greek physicians and philosophers, including figures like Hippocrates, had access to Egyptian medical texts and learned from Egyptian physicians who had practiced for centuries before Greek medicine began to develop. Many concepts that we associate with Greek medicine, including the systematic observation of disease symptoms and the idea that diseases had natural rather than purely supernatural causes, can be traced back to Egyptian sources. Imagine Hippocrates, often called the father of Western medicine, studying in Alexandria or consulting with Egyptian physicians who had inherited thousands of years of accumulated medical wisdom. The famous Hippocratic Oath, with its emphasis on medical ethics and the physician's duty to first do no harm, reflects principles that were already well established in Egyptian medical practice centuries before Hippocrates was born. The Egyptian influence on Greek medicine extended far beyond general principles to include specific diagnostic techniques, surgical procedures, and pharmaceutical knowledge. Greek physicians adopted Egyptian methods for examining patients, setting bones, treating wounds, and preparing medicinal compounds. They also inherited the Egyptian tradition of medical specialization and the systematic documentation of medical knowledge. The Roman Empire, in turn, absorbed both Greek and Egyptian medical traditions, creating a synthesis that would influence European medicine for over 1,000 years. Roman physicians studied Egyptian medical texts, employed Egyptian-trained doctors, and incorporated Egyptian remedies into their own medical practice. The extensive Roman trade networks helped spread this medical knowledge throughout Europe, North Africa, and Asia. During the medieval period, Islamic scholars played a crucial role in preserving and expanding upon the medical knowledge inherited from Egyptian and Greek sources. Physicians like Avicenna and Al-Razi studied ancient Egyptian medical texts alongside Greek and Roman sources, creating comprehensive medical encyclopedias that combined the best insights from all these traditions. Their work helped preserve Egyptian medical knowledge through the European Dark Ages and made it available to later Renaissance physicians. The Renaissance marked a crucial turning point in the evolution of medical knowledge. As European physicians began to challenge medieval medical doctrines and seek new approaches to understanding health and disease, they often found support for their innovative ideas in ancient Egyptian practices that had been forgotten or misunderstood during the intervening centuries. The renewed interest in anatomical study, systematic observation, and empirical research that characterized Renaissance medicine represented in many ways a return to the approach that Egyptian physicians had pioneered thousands of years earlier. Consider how specific Egyptian medical innovations evolved and developed over time. The Egyptian practice of using willow bark for pain relief eventually led to the isolation of salicin and the development of aspirin. Egyptian surgical techniques for treating fractures provided the foundation for modern orthopedic surgery. Egyptian pharmaceutical preparations influenced the development of modern pharmacology, and Egyptian approaches to medical education shaped the development of medical schools throughout Europe and beyond. The evolution of medical knowledge from Egyptian origins to modern practice wasn't a straight line of progress, but rather a complex process of transmission, adaptation, loss, and rediscovery. Many Egyptian medical insights were forgotten for centuries before being rediscovered by modern researchers. Other Egyptian practices continued to influence medical thinking even when their original rationale was no longer understood. The concept of medical specialization provides an excellent example of this complex evolutionary process. The Egyptians had developed an extensive system of medical specialties based on careful observation, of which physicians achieved the best results, treating specific types of conditions. This tradition influenced Greek and Roman medicine, was preserved and expanded by Islamic physicians, and eventually formed the basis for the medical specialization that characterizes modern medicine. Similarly, the Egyptian emphasis on systematic documentation of medical knowledge provided the foundation for the scientific literature that drives modern medical advancement. The careful recording of treatment protocols, patient outcomes, and therapeutic discoveries that began with Egyptian medical papyri evolved into the peer-reviewed medical journals and evidence-based practice guidelines that guide contemporary medicine. The Egyptian integration of preventive and therapeutic medicine also anticipated modern public health approaches. Their understanding that environmental factors, lifestyle choices, and community practices affected health outcomes provided the conceptual foundation for modern epidemiology and preventive medicine. While they couldn't understand the mechanisms involved, Egyptian physicians recognized patterns that modern medical science has confirmed and explained. As you reflect on this long journey from ancient Egyptian medicine to modern medical practice, consider how each generation of physicians built upon the insights of their predecessors while adding their own discoveries and innovations. The absence of germ theory and controlled clinical trials in Egyptian medicine doesn't diminish their achievements, but rather highlights the cumulative nature of medical progress and the importance of the foundation they provided. As we prepare to conclude our exploration of Egyptian medicine and its lasting influence, let your thoughts drift toward an appreciation of the remarkable continuity that connects ancient healing practices with contemporary medical care. The systematic approach, evidence-based thinking, and commitment to patient welfare that characterize the best of modern medicine all have their roots in the pioneering work of ancient Egyptian physicians. As our journey through the corridors of ancient Egyptian medicine draws to a peaceful close, imagine yourself standing once more in that temple library where we began, surrounded by the gentle rustle of papyrus scrolls and the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of healers. The question that brought us here tonight, did ancient Egypt invent our modern medicine, has revealed itself to be both simpler and more complex than it first appeared. The answer, as you have discovered through our exploration, is both yes and no, depending on how we understand the relationship between invention and evolution in medical practice. Ancient Egypt didn't invent modern medicine in the sense of creating our current understanding of germs, antibiotics, or advanced surgical techniques. However, they established virtually every fundamental principle upon which modern medicine is built: systematic observation, evidence-based treatment, medical specialization, comprehensive documentation, and the integration of prevention with therapeutic care. Consider the remarkable intellectual achievement this represents. Over 4,000 years ago, in a world where most human ailments were attributed to supernatural forces or divine displeasure, Egyptian physicians chose to look for natural patterns and causes. They decided that careful observation could unlock the mysteries of health and disease, that systematic study could improve treatment outcomes, and that accumulated knowledge could be preserved and transmitted to benefit future generations. This shift from supernatural to natural explanations for disease represents one of the most profound intellectual revolutions in human history. It required not just individual brilliance, but cultural support for scientific thinking, institutional frameworks for preserving knowledge, and social structures that could support dedicated medical professionals. Ancient Egypt provided all of these conditions, creating the world's first truly scientific approach to medicine. The evidence for Egyptian medical sophistication is overwhelming in its scope and consistency. From the surgical precision documented in the Edwin Smith Papyrus to the pharmaceutical sophistication of the Ebers Papyrus. From the anatomical accuracy revealed in mummified remains to the public health innovations found in archaeological sites. Everything points to a medical system that rivaled anything developed in subsequent centuries. Think about the sheer audacity of what Egyptian physicians accomplished. They performed successful brain surgery using bronze instruments. They created functional prosthetics that restored mobility to amputees. They developed antibiotics from moldy bread and antiseptics from honey. They established medical schools, specialized training programs, and professional standards that ensured consistent, high-quality care across their empire. Perhaps even more remarkable is the longevity of their influence. When we trace the development of medical thinking from ancient Greece through the Islamic Golden Age to the European Renaissance and into the modern era, we find Egyptian medical concepts and practices at every stage. The systematic approach to patient care, the emphasis on careful observation and documentation, the integration of surgical and pharmaceutical treatments, the concept of medical specialization, all of these fundamental aspects of modern medicine can be traced directly back to Egyptian origins. The question of invention versus evolution becomes clearer when we understand medical progress as a cumulative process rather than a series of isolated breakthroughs. Modern medicine isn't the creation of any single culture or historical period, but rather the result of thousands of years of gradual accumulation, refinement, and expansion of medical knowledge. In this long process of medical evolution, ancient Egypt provided the foundation upon which everything else was built. Imagine the intellectual courage required to embark on this journey of medical discovery. Egyptian physicians had no textbooks to guide them, no established scientific methods to follow, no prior examples of systematic medical practice to emulate. They had to create everything from scratch: diagnostic techniques, treatment protocols, surgical procedures, pharmaceutical preparations, and educational systems. The fact that they succeeded so brilliantly and that their innovations continued to influence medical practice for millennia speaks to both their individual genius and their cultural commitment to rational inquiry. The legacy of Egyptian medicine extends far beyond specific techniques or remedies to encompass fundamental approaches to understanding health and disease. The Egyptian emphasis on careful observation, systematic documentation, and evidence-based treatment created a template for medical practice that remains valid today. Their integration of prevention with treatment, their recognition of the importance of environmental factors in health, and their holistic approach to patient care all anticipate contemporary medical thinking. Consider how Egyptian medical principles continue to influence modern practice. When a contemporary physician conducts a systematic examination of a patient, carefully documenting symptoms and treatment responses, they are following procedures that were first established in ancient Egypt. When medical students learn anatomy through dissection and study, they are participating in an educational tradition that began with Egyptian physicians. When researchers test new treatments and carefully document their results, they are using methodology that traces back to Egyptian medical practice. The pharmaceutical innovations of ancient Egypt continue to influence modern medicine in both direct and indirect ways. Many plant-based remedies that Egyptian physicians discovered are still used today, either in their original form or as the basis for synthetic medications. The Egyptian understanding of dosage, preparation methods, and drug interactions provided crucial foundations for modern pharmacology. Even their recognition that some treatments work better for certain patients than others anticipates modern, personalized medicine approaches. Egyptian surgical techniques, while necessarily limited by available technology, demonstrated principles that remain fundamental to modern surgical practice. Their emphasis on proper sterile technique, careful pre-operative assessment, and systematic post-operative care established standards that continue to guide surgical practice today. The Egyptian recognition that some conditions require surgical intervention while others respond better to medical treatment reflects the kind of clinical judgment that characterizes modern surgical decision-making. The Egyptian approach to medical education, with its emphasis on systematic study, supervised practice, and continuous learning, provided the template for medical training programs that continue to shape physician education around the world. The Egyptian tradition of medical specialization, based on the recognition that different conditions require different expertise, established the principle of specialized medical training that characterizes modern medical practice. As you contemplate this remarkable legacy, consider how the story of Egyptian medicine challenges our assumptions about historical progress. We often think of medical advancement as a recent phenomenon, with most important discoveries occurring in the past few centuries. However, the Egyptian experience demonstrates that sophisticated medical thinking and effective medical practice developed much earlier than we might have expected. The preservation of Egyptian medical knowledge through written documentation allowed their insights to survive and influence medical practice for thousands of years. This highlights the crucial importance of systematic knowledge preservation and transmission in the advancement of medical science. The Egyptian commitment to documenting their medical discoveries created a foundation of accumulated wisdom that could be built upon by subsequent generations of physicians. The Egyptian integration of empirical observation with systematic documentation created a model for medical research that remains valid today. While they lacked the sophisticated statistical methods and controlled experimental designs that characterize modern medical research, their fundamental approach, careful observation, systematic recording, and evidence-based modification of treatment protocols, established the basic methodology that continues to drive medical advancement. The holistic approach to health and healing that characterized Egyptian medicine also anticipates contemporary trends in medical thinking. Their recognition that health involves not just the absence of disease, but the maintenance of overall well-being, their emphasis on prevention as well as treatment, and their understanding of the importance of environmental and social factors in health outcomes all reflect insights that modern medicine is rediscovering and incorporating into contemporary practice. As we conclude our exploration of this remarkable medical tradition, take a moment to appreciate the profound debt that modern medicine owes to these ancient innovators. Every time you visit a doctor who conducts a systematic examination, every time you take a medication that has been carefully tested and documented, every time you benefit from specialized medical expertise, you are experiencing the legacy of ancient Egyptian medicine. The story of Egyptian medicine is ultimately a story of human curiosity, dedication, and ingenuity. These ancient physicians, working with primitive tools but guided by sophisticated thinking, established principles and practices that continue to benefit humanity thousands of years later. Their commitment to rational inquiry, systematic study, and evidence-based practice created the foundation upon which all subsequent medical advancement has been built. As you drift towards sleep, let your mind rest in the comforting knowledge that the healing traditions that protect and nurture us today have roots stretching back through millennia of human caring and discovery. The gentle touch of a modern physician, the precision of contemporary surgery, and the effectiveness of current medications all carry within them the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of healers. beginning with those remarkable innovators who first established the principles of systematic medicine along the banks of the ancient Nile. The question of whether ancient Egypt invented modern medicine has revealed itself to be less important than the recognition that Egyptian physicians created the intellectual and practical foundations that made all subsequent medical advancement possible. In that sense, every medical breakthrough, every life saved, and every moment of healing that occurs in the modern world carries within it a small echo of that ancient Egyptian commitment to understanding, documenting, and improving the human condition. Sleep well, knowing that the traditions of care and healing that surround us today are part of an unbroken chain of human dedication to health and wellness that stretches back over 4,000 years to the remarkable physicians of ancient Egypt. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the fascinating intersection of ancient wisdom and modern medicine. The story of Egyptian medical innovation reminds us that human ingenuity and the desire to heal have been constants throughout history, creating connections across millennia between past and present, between ancient healers and contemporary physicians, between the first systematic approach to medicine and the sophisticated medical care we enjoy today.